Right, boys and girls, I'm looking for Mrs. Gale again. I cannot find her. Wait, what is this? Mrs. Gale, what are you doing?
What can I say except you're welcome?
What on earth are you doing? Are you literally singing in the rain?
Yeah, I'm singing from Moana, the rock.
All right, can we get on with the lesson, please?
Oh, this is way much more interesting than that. Okay, fine. Let's go.
Mrs. Gale! What are you doing? We need to start teaching. Right, hello boys and girls, it's Miss Mia and Mrs. Gale here. She stopped singing in the rain, which is great. So hopefully you've watched and have completed the past few lessons of the English, and you've really enjoyed the text Macbeth. I know, Mrs. Gale, it's one of your favourites.
Yeah, I love Macbeth. I really gutted that.
Sorry.
We're not doing it. Yeah, I love it. It's a great text.
No, they are doing it. They're doing it at home.
I know.
Rather than in here.
We miss you.
Mrs. Gale misses you.
I
miss you as well.
Yeah, we really miss you.
So hopefully you've listened to the text. If you haven't, it's on YouTube, so please do listen to it. Yeah. Because all of our English lessons will be linked to the and hopefully you really enjoy the text. Right, shall we
it's great
crack
text.
on?
Yeah.
Right, so today we're going to start off with a starter, like always. And our starter today is relative clauses. So Mrs. Gale, what is a relative clause? Tell me.
Well, a relative clause is additional information in a sentence, but it also contains a relative pronoun. It's really, really important.
It must contain a relative pronoun.
It also contains,
It
definitely.
must
It
contain.
must contain a relative pronoun. So go on, Miss Mia. Our relative pronouns are what?
Okay, so some of our relative pronouns are the following. So we've got who, we've got whose, we've got that, we've got which, we've got whom as well.
Okay, let's just say those relative pronouns together. 3, 2, 1. Who, whose, that, which, whom.
So these are the most common ones that we often come across, but there are more as well. So this first question here, so it's a past tense question, says the following.
I'll do it like that because you prefer it like that, don't you?
Sorry.
Sorry.
What are you doing? So it says the following. Underline the relative clause in each sentence. So just a relative clause. If you take away the relative clause from the sentence, what are you left with, Mrs. Gale?
You're left with the main clause.
Do you want to come and say that on the screen?
Just do it from outside. You're left with the main clause, and the main clause contains a subject and a verb, and it also makes sense on its own. So that relative clause won't make sense on its own. And actually, they've made it harder here because they've not put any punctuation to identify where there is.
to help you.
Yeah.
So you've been listening.
I know. I
well
try.
done, Mrs. Gale.
Thanks.
So underline the relative clause in each sentence. I'm going to read you each of the sentences, and then we'll start underlining. Remember, the relative clause must begin with what, Mrs. Gale?
Must begin with a relative pronoun. Gosh, sorry, I was thinking about like the sentence starters.
Right. Okay. So the first one says, "We visited the fun fair that came to our town." The second one, my uncle who lives in Australia has sent me a present. And the third one, my friend whose rabbit I look after is on holiday. Right, so let's do the first one together. Mrs. Gale quite helpfully has listed some of the relative pronouns down here. So we've got who, whose, that, which, and whom. We know that all relative clauses begin with a relative pronoun. So the first thing I'm going to do is look for a relative pronoun in the sentence. So Mrs. Gale, tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Brilliant. Now it says relative clause, not pronoun. So if I just did this, I wouldn't get the mark. That's the relative pronoun, not the clause. Right, so let's have a read of this sentence again. So I know this is where the relative clause begins. We visited the fun fair. Is that a main clause, Mrs. Gale?
Yes, because you could put a full stop at the end there, and subject and verb. Verb would be visited, subject would be we.
Okay. And if we got rid of that came to our town, you know that is additional information. Mm-hmm. That's adding extra information to the main clause here. So our relative clause for this sentence is, that came to our town. If we just did that came, we would then have, we visited the fun fair to our town. It wouldn't make sense. So if you're never quite sure, just put your hands over some of the words, read the sentence back to yourself. Does it make sense? If it doesn't, then it's not correct. So that's the first one. Mrs. Gale, do you want to do the second one?
So the second one here, I'm looking
You can make the screen full screen. I know that's how you prefer it.
Yeah, it's okay. So my uncle who lives in Australia has sent me a present. So don't forget the relative clause can be in the middle or at the end of a sentence. So this particular one here, the relative clause was at the end. So my relative pronoun, Miss Mia, tell me when to stop.
I'm joking. You should have stopped there.
Yeah.
Just your
You've got no help. You've got no chance at home. Right, okay. My uncle, who lives in Australia, has sent me a present. Now, actually, I know that during writing sessions, we would ask you to identify the relative clause by using commas, brackets,
Dashes.
or dashes, okay, to identify it, but they haven't put this in here. So my uncle, who lives in Australia, has sent me a present. I can read it like that, and I can already see where the extra information is, and it is who lives in Australia. Okay.
If we got rid of who lives in Australia, we'll then have my uncle has sent me a present. That's the main clause. It makes sense on its own. My uncle is a subject, sent is a verb, and it makes sense on its own. Okay? And then the third one. My friend whose rabbit I look after is on holiday. I know already that the relative clause is in the middle of the sentence again. Okay? So like Mrs. Gale said, it can either come at the end or the middle of a sentence. So my friend whose rabbit I look after is on holiday. Mrs. Gale told me to stop for the relative pronoun.
Stop.
Good. So I can already hear, so whose rabbit I look after, that's my relative clause, because my friend is on holiday, makes sense on its own. So that's just us modelling one of the questions. We're now going to show you 2 other questions related to relative clauses. Please have a go, pause the video on each question, and give it a go, and we'll go through the answers. So question number 1, which sentence contains a relative clause? You've got four sentences here. So the boy who I met at the park is in my class. The team is going to play a match tomorrow. Sue said that she wanted to learn to play the drums. Whenever they have time, they like to go cycling. So pause the video here, have a go. Okay, so the answer for this question then. So we can use a process of elimination. So I know I need to be looking for a relative pronoun. I know by looking at this, there are 2 sentences that do not contain a relative pronoun. If I go back to this slide, these are some of my common relative pronouns. I know that in this question there are 2 sentences that don't contain any relative pronoun. Miss Scale, do you know which 2 I'm talking about?
Yes, I know exactly which 2. So it's the second one and the fourth one. There's no relative pronouns at all, so let's get rid of them.
So we can get rid of those. And then we're left with 2. So we've got the first one here, the boy who I met at the park is in my class, or Sue said that she wanted to learn to play the drums. So we know that relative clause adds additional information to the main clause in a sentence. We know here that we've got some additional information, the relative pronoun being who, so who I met at the park. That is some extra information. If I got rid of that, I'd have the boy is in my class. If I look at this one, it says Sue said that she wanted to learn to play the drums. Now, Mrs. Gale, why would that not be a relative clause?
She said that she wanted to learn to play the drums because actually you can't see where the relative clause is here because there's no extra information. That she wanted to learn to play the drums is telling you about what Sue had said. Whereas this part here, the boy who I met at the park, is giving you that extra information there. And this part here isn't giving you any extra information here. It's just telling you that she wanted to learn to play the drums.
So which one would you tick?
Okay, so I would tick the top one here.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Number 2. So last question. Tick one box to show which part of the sentence is a relative clause. So you're given 4 boxes here. I'm going to read you the question. The table, which is made of oak, is now black with age. So which part of the sentence contains a relative clause? Remember, it must begin with a relative pronoun. So if we have a look, would it be the table?
No.
There's no relative pronoun there. Would it be is now black?
No.
With age?
No.
So we know it's this. Why do we know it's this, Mrs. Gale?
Because it starts with which is a relative pronoun, and also which is made of oak is extra information as a clause.
So hopefully you got those accurate. And if not, go back and look at relative pronouns and clauses yourself. You can always do some independent study if needs be. Right, the yellow today. Hello. To use direct speech accurately. And that keyword accurately, Mrs. Gale, you're very keen on that word.
Yeah,
Why?
it's really, really important to get the expected standard and the greater depth standard in writing. It has to be accurate, and it can't just be sometimes you're accurate, sometimes you're not. It needs to be quite consistent in your writing. So it's
And
really
throughout
important.
all pieces of writing whenever you're using direct speech. So whether it be in English, whether it be in science or history or geography, it doesn't matter where, you need to be accurate. Before we do anything, I would like you to pause the video here. If you have a thesaurus, please grab a thesaurus. If not, go on to Google. Google has a thesaurus as well. And see how many synonyms you can find for said in the next 2 minutes. I'm going to give Mrs. Gale a thesaurus myself.
Thank you.
And Mrs. Gale is also going to be doing this task. So pause the video here and off you go. How many synonyms for said can you find? Okay, so we're back and we've got some synonyms for said. Mrs. Gale, hit me.
Shout, cry, yell, scream, shriek. Let's do 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mutter, moaned.
That's what you do a lot.
I just literally was about to say this. Complain, which is what I feel I do about you. Murmur.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's a great one, isn't it?
Yep.
Let's have a look at some other ones. Growled.
Okay, that's
Something
our
ugly.
10th.
Scoff. So you
Right,
sneer,
well-
scoff or jeer if someone is making fun of another person. So for example, they've got here, you'll never win the race on that old bike. Tim scoffed. I love
That
that
means
one.
going, oh.
Yeah.
Right, so hopefully you found some synonyms for said. If not, we've got loads up on the board. Actually, 11 with Mrs. Gale's additional bonus one to choose from. Please remember them because it will really up-level your writing later on. We've got a sentence here. Now, we know this character already. Who is this character, Mrs. Gale?
That is Lady Macbeth.
Lady Macbeth, and you've met her in the book already. We know that she is a wife of Macbeth. And it says here, look at the sentence below. What are the rules for speech? Now, we've already looked at direct speech, so hopefully you should be able to look at this sentence and be like, oh, do you know what? I know what the rules are. So I'm going to read you the sentence, and then I would like you to pause the video and have a conversation with either someone around you or have a think to yourself. What are the rules for direct speech? So, you must kill King Duncan, exclaimed Lady Macbeth. So pause the video here. What are the rules? Okay, so on the next slide, so on this slide here, I have colour-coded different parts of this particular sentence just to help you remember the rules for direct speech. Now, if you need to, when you're completing the activity, come back to this slide because they will have all the information that you need, okay? All right, let's start off with the green box, Mrs. Gale. So I'll show you what the green box is and you can read it.
Okay, speech marks to open and close the dialogue. So the dialogue is what the person is actually saying. And in this instant, Lady Macbeth is saying, you must kill King Duncan. So
read it
there's
with
our
expression.
dialogue.
You must kill King Duncan.
That's tragic, isn't it? So the speech marks here at the front and at the back, at the closing and opening the dialogue.
Okay, so the next one we're going to look at is the red box here, okay? So it says capital letters at the start of the speech. So every single time when you use direct speech, you must always begin with a capital letter. What must you begin with, Mrs. Gale?
With a capital letter.
Well done, Mrs. Gale.
Thank you.
It doesn't matter if it's in the middle of your sentence. If you're using speech, it has to always begin with a capital letter, and that is a must. Right, the next one, if we go for this blue one here.
Okay.
Okay, so it says a piece of punctuation before the closing speech mark. Do you want to elaborate on that, or shall I elaborate on that?
You can go for it. I'll do the next one.
Okay, so depending on where your speech is in your sentence, you can have one or few punctuation mark at the end, and it must come before the closing speech mark. So if it's at the end of a sentence, your speech comes right at the end of a sentence, you can have a full stop. If it's right at the end. Okay, and if you have the person speaking, so it could be Lady Macbeth exclaimed, you must kill King Duncan, full stop. That would work because that shows the end of the sentence. However, if it's not in the end of the sentence, you need to have either one of the following. So a comma, an exclamation mark, it could be a question mark.
Yep.
Sometimes you have ellipses as well, and that works too. Okay, so you really need to think about the positioning of your dialogue to help you really identify which piece of punctuation to use. And remember, an exclamation mark shows expression, so shows some emotion. So if someone is saying it and they're whispering it, using an exclamation mark would not really be useful, because exclamation mark is related to really powerful use of emotion. So exclaiming, shouting, growling, all that sort of stuff.
Synonyms for said. It's very boring to read a piece of writing when you had said. So try, it's important that you
Having
have
what?
Said. Synonyms are just different words that mean said, okay? So that's what it means. It means things that mean the same meaning as said. So here we've got exclaimed, you could have retorted, shouted, barked, lots and lots of things that you could have there instead of the word said. It's really important to have the variety in your writing, particularly in year 6, moving through to secondary.
Okay, let's have a look at what this says. This is an important rule. New speaker, new line. So if I had this sentence and then she was talking to Macbeth, obviously it's a dialogue. If Macbeth is talking, I will need to start a new line because it's a new speaker. So I always remember new speaker, new line. What is it, Mrs. Gale?
New speaker, new line. If Lady Macbeth carried on speaking, you must kill Duncan, exclaimed Lady Macbeth, and she might say, you need to do it quickly. you would then carry on the same line because it's the same person speaking. So even if she says something different, you don't start a new line for the same speaker. It's a new line for a different speaker.
A new speaker. Thank you, Mrs. Gill. That's good clarification. And then commas to separate the speech from the clause. So if, by this I mean, if you had Lady Macbeth exclaimed at the beginning, if it started off with the speaker and then you had your dialogue, you must have Lady Macbeth exclaimed, have the comma, and then whatever she said.
Yeah.
So if you have the person's name at the beginning, before you start the actual speech, you must have a comma to separate the clauses. Okay, that's really important. If it's at the end, you don't need to have a comma because you have that piece of punctuation before your closing speech mark. So let's go through the rules one more time. I'm going to say it, then Mrs. Gale's going to say it after me.
Okay.
Speech marks to open and close the dialogue.
Speech marks to open and enclose the dialogue.
And enclose.
Enclose. Close the dialogue.
Let's do that again.
It's been a long day.
Right. Speech marks to open and close the dialogue.
Speech marks to open and close the dialogue.
Capital letter at the start of the speech.
Join in with me at home. Capital letter at the start of the speech.
Okay. A piece of punctuation before the closing speech mark.
A piece of punctuation before the closing speech marks.
New speaker, new line.
New speaker, new line.
Comma to separate the speech from the clause.
Comma to separate the speech from the clause.
That just depends on where your speaker is. So where you put it and where your speech is. And the last one, not necessarily a rule, but just makes your writing a lot more exciting. Synonyms for said.
Synonyms for said.
Mrs. Gale said in a very monotone voice. All right, so hopefully that all makes sense. If you need to, make sure you pause the video here, jot down some of the rules if you need to as well. Okay, let's move on. So, be the teacher. We've got Macbeth here and we've got Banquo here. So we know that these two are very close friends. Or they begin off by being really close friends and then things happen. And we've got two pieces or two sentences here which Mrs. Gale has quite kindly written. May not be accurate, so let's see. So Macbeth is saying, Macbeth replied, I will not kill the king. And then Banquo says, you must be careful, Macbeth, warned Banquo. So we know already, having a look, and if we think back at our actual rules, we know that these sentences here, there is a few pieces of punctuation missing. So because Mrs. Gale wrote these sentences, she will now self-correct, won't you, Mrs. Gale?
Yep, so just pause the video for a minute, and I reckon actually have a go yourselves before
Absolutely.
I start self-correcting it. Where are the mistakes? Okay, and if you want to, you could rewrite it out correctly with the accurate punctuation. And when I model it, you can just put a little tick above it if you corrected that part. Okay? So, first things first is I've missed the comma here. Macbeth replied, comma, I must have that comma. I must have a capital letter here for an I, so I must have a capital I there. I've missed two of those things there. Inverted comma is correct, synonyms for said, fine, capital letter at the start there for Macbeth because it's also a proper noun. Macbeth replied, comma, open inverted commas, I will not kill the king. I haven't put any punctuation in here before the end of the inverted commas. That's really important. Macbeth replied, I will not kill the king. You could have an exclamation mark there as well, and you also could have a full stop, okay, if you wanted either one. I'm going to have an exclamation mark there before the inverted commas. Okay.
Well done, Mrs. Gale. Good self-correcting. And if we look at the next one here, we've got the person who's speaking at the end. So we would not need a comma here because it's not at the beginning. So you've got, you must be careful, Macbeth, warned Banquo. That we are missing the opening inverted commas. We need to know where the dialogue begins, and that's where it begins. We know that dialogue must always begin with what, Mrs. Gale?
A capital letter.
Good. So that needs to become a capital Y. So you must be careful, Macbeth. We have got a piece of punctuation and we've got the closing speech marks to show that the dialogue has ended. We've got a synonym for said. You don't need it, but it's good. And we've got Banquo, we've got a capital B. Now what we haven't got is a piece of punctuation at the end of the sentence to show that that is one complete thought. So it's really important not just punctuating the direct speech and the dialogue. You actually need to look at the whole sentence in its entirety and make sure it's completely punctuated accurately. Miss Gale, do you want to say anything?
No, I think you've clarified everything.
Okay, cool. So, boys and girls, that was a really quick and succinct chat about direct speech and how to use it. So I'm now going to quickly show you all the different activities that you'll be doing. Everything is available on the school website, so please do go online and have a go. Right, so bronze is... Oh, before we do that though,
Nice
we
one,
will
Miss
watch.
Mia.
Sorry, we will watch this video. So this video is just going to summarise the first part of the text Macbeth. Okay, so sit back.
So just before it begins there, can we just go back to those slides there,
Oh,
Miss
yeah,
Mia?
sure.
So it's called, like, part one of it's called The Weird Sisters, and it's where Macbeth and Banquo are returning from battle, and they fought together. So they're both referred to as sometimes Macbeth the general, Banquo the general, because they're both generals within the army, are returning from battle when they meet the three weird sisters on the Heath. Okay, and the Heath is a hilly area. There were three weird sisters that are sometimes referred to as the witches upon the Heath, and they're returning to battle, and it's all set in Scotland. So actually, when you hear the narration, a lot of it is with a Scottish accent. So it's really important you understand the context before you look at it.
Also, these slides are going to be on the website, so this link will be on the slides itself, and you can actually click on the link and have a watch in your own time again, because these are really good animations. So I'll just put it on for you now, and then you can have a quick watch.
This is a story of ambition, power, and murder. It is the story of a man who would stop at nothing to become king. It is a dark and bloody story that starts on a wild Scottish heathland, where three witches plot and spin their spells.
When shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain? When the hardly battle is done, when the battle's lost and won. That will be ere the set of sun. Where the place? Upon the heath. There to meet Macbeth.
Macbeth, a Scottish lord. Here he is, not far from those witches, leading the Scottish army against a combined force of invading Norwegians and Scottish rebels.
Kings of Tyrone and Scotland!
The battle is long and hard. Macbeth fights with great valor, and eventually...
Macbeth! My lord, look! The Norwegians and the rebels run!
The battle is won, Banquo!
The day is yours!
And Scotland's! Come, Banquo. We must find King Duncan and take him the good news. Sound the drum!
Back on the heath, the witches wait.
Sisters, wait. Do you hear?
A drum! A drum!
Macbeth doth come.
Quick! We must finish the spell!
Thrice to thine,
And thrice to mine.
thrice again makes up 9. The spell is done.
Nearby, Macbeth and Banquo pause in the gloom upon the heath.
I have never seen such a day, so foul yet so fair.
Aye.
Banquo, look, in the mist.
What are they? Men? Women?
Are they even human?
Who are you? What are you?
Speak, if you can.
All hail, Macbeth.
How do these creatures know my name?
All hail Macbeth, Thane of Cawdor.
But I am not Thane of Cawdor.
What do you mean? Can you see the future?
What else do you see?
All hail Macbeth, Thane of Cawdor, and one day, King of Scotland.
No, that cannot be. Get away from me.
Macbeth, what are you scared of? Why be afraid of good news? If you really can see into the future, what happens to me? Tell me.
Hail Banquo,
Lesser than Macbeth, and greater.
not so happy, yet much happier. Your children will be kings.
But you will never be.
So hail Macbeth and Banquo.
They're going.
Wait, how can I be Thane of Cawdor? He's still alive. How can I, Macbeth, become king?
And how can I be father of kings, but not be a king myself? They're gone.
Into thin air.
What were they?
Witches, for sure. Come. We must find the king.
Okay, so boys and girls, as you've all listened to the story on YouTube, like I said before you listened to the story was an adaptation of Macbeth. So as we go through this unit of work, I will be showing you more of the animation. It's broken down into lots of different sections, so hopefully it will just add to your knowledge of the story and of William Shakespeare's play. So, the reason why you need to know this information is because your work is going to be based on what you've just watched. So bronze is the following. Remember, all this work is up on the website. Okay, bronze is the following. Be the teacher, look at the sentence below and make the corrections. So you've got 5 sentences. You need to make the corrections using direct speech accurately, so you can just pen it. Silver is extend the dialogue by adding a response to each sentence below. Try and include action to support your dialogue, because if you just had speech after speech after speech, it's quite boring. And if you read a book, and when you read a book, you wouldn't just have one person talking and another person just responding. You'd have a bit of dialogue, bit of action in between. So try and include and incorporate some action. Miss Gay, you look quizzical.
No, I'm just having to think what I would have for that first part, extending the dialogue by adding a response to each sentence. No, it's fine.
So Macbeth was all the witches and shouted, "What do you want? Why are you here?" So you can then have one of the witches responding.
Yeah.
You can have Banquo responding to Macbeth. So just have a think. You just watched the video, just have a think. So you've got 4 sentences here. And then gold, if you'd like to work your way up to this, is the following. So write a dialogue between Macbeth, Banquo and the witches. Remember to include action to break up the speech and use the rules for direct speech. You can also include a setting description if you would like. So I started one here. All of this is up on the website as well. So I've just written on the precipice. So that just means on the edge, okay? Of the misty heath in Scotland, the clouds gathered and the sky turned violet with rage. Battle cries erupt from the distance. Brave men fight to the death. 3 haggard witches stand waiting in anticipation for the man known as Macbeth and his companion Banquo. Cheers rippled through moors. Victory prevailed over the Norwegian army, and the witches knew that the men were on the way. "They are close, I can feel them, they are close," exclaimed one. "I can hear the galloping hooves of the horses," whispered the other. So as you can see here, I've got a new speaker. Okay, so that's witch number 1, witch number 2, so I've got a new speaker, new line. "It is now time to cast a spell and make them believe," sniggered the last. As predicted, both men arrived, scarred and bruised from war. The horses came to an abrupt halt. A cloud of green dissipated to reveal these unworldly monsters. "Who are you? What do you want?" A sword was retrieved by the brave soldier who was ready to attack. I've got a passive voice here. Mate, that's a good piece of writing.
Yeah, that is a good piece of
I
writing.
actually wrote that myself.
Well done, well done.
Thank you.
And you can really clearly see where the dialogue is and that direct speech, and that learning objective was accurately. And you can see here Miss Mia's taken into all account all those different rules that we looked at earlier, which is really important.
And hopefully you can see how action has been used to actually move the dialogue on, to actually move the story along. So, hopefully boys and girls, you enjoyed that lesson about direct speech and you've learnt something or recapped your knowledge. And enjoy, stay safe and take care. Bye.
See ya. Bye.